Antonio Martínez sat under the veranda of the centuries-old castle, Castellano, on a shiny black ebony horse chair, adorned with faint red floral patterns. His whole body swayed gently with the rhythm, like a child riding on the back of a wooden horse. The middle-aged man's eyes focused intently on the leaves in front of him, where the sun rays pierced through, causing him to squint slightly, as if pondering something. The cigarette in his mouth continued to emit white smoke, filling the air with its scent. A faint smirk played on his lips. He thought about the upcoming wedding tomorrow between his eldest son, Juan Martínez, and Ana Rodríguezguía, the daughter of the renowned wine dynasty. In fact, this was a union between wealthy and prestigious families of the Montblanco region. Antonio was the most influential figure in the financial sector of the area, also serving as the global distributor for 3 famous products of other noble families in the Montblanco region. After the marriage alliance, the power and profits of the Martínez financial conglomerate would be further strengthened. As a dynasty controlling finance and banking, they held sway over the entire Montblanco region. No one wanted to sever ties with the financial resources invested by the Martínez family. With sinister thoughts in his mind, Antonio smiled arrogantly, lost in the anticipation of the benefits to come. He closed his eyes to savor that joy. A refreshing breeze cut through the sweltering noon, making Antonio feel comfortable. He drifted into sleep with a smile still on his face. Antonio dreamily heard a cold voice whispering in his ear, "The Martínez lineage, go to hell. Go to hell." He opened his eyes and saw no one. Looking around, he caught a glimpse of a figure ascending the staircase. He hurriedly followed, sensing reluctance to enter. However, an invisible force compelled him forward. With each reluctant step, he felt a chilling breeze. In the dim light of the closed room, he saw a disfigured face smeared with blood, with eyes full of resentment, causing him to scream. Yet, he felt an invisible hand gripping his shirt. The man's throat choked. A terrifying laughter filled the air, as if from a distant realm or the depths of hell. He felt fear, wanting to escape. In the eerie light, he saw not just one face, but many, all filled with pain and hatred, mouths gaping open. In the silence, horrifying voices whispered, "It's time to pay. Go to hell." The floor creaked and cracked, revealing a deep, dark crevice. Before him was a fiery pit, its heat radiating fiercely. He stepped forward, staring into the blazing inferno. The man yelled in horror at the sight of the blazing red flames. Antonio jolted awake, drenched in sweat as if he had taken a shower. Reflecting on the dream, he shuddered. He reassured himself, realizing it was just a dream, wondering why he felt so anxious. After all, it's only others who fear him. How could he fear a trivial dream? Thinking so, he regained his composure and the inherent coldness. Standing up, he went to wash his face, then returned to his seat to smoke. Antonio was once again filled with confidence and excitement, as if nothing had happened. He thought again about the joys to come. Sofia came to sit beside her husband, observing Antonio's expression, knowing what he was thinking. She remained silent for a moment before timidly speaking, "Antonio, given our current status, is this marriage alliance really necessary? Have you considered Juan's feelings? It seems to sadden him. Please think about Carmen." Antonio, filled with excitement, suddenly felt a cold splash on his face. He glared disapprovingly at his wife. "Our son is getting married, not going to battle as you make it sound. I'm only concerned for this family." He paused, refraining from lighting another cigarette, then continued with a long exhale. "You and I got married like this, and we've survived until now. Even Juan has accepted this marriage alliance willingly. Besides, he lives comfortably without any hardship, so his mother should be thankful to me, shouldn't she? I've never mistreated him. You understand this best. Everyone has agreed, and the wedding is just a few days away. Please don't stir up more trouble." Sofia said nothing more, anticipating what her husband would say. Thinking about the young man's sorrowful expression, her heart tightened. He wasn't her biological son, but Sofia had raised Juan since he was in her womb. Over the past 20-some years, her maternal love for Juan was no different from that of a biological mother. Juan was a kind and understanding young man, loving and respecting Sofia as his own mother. Now, seeing her son's sadness, she felt helpless. Sofia had experienced firsthand the hardships of arranged marriages. She had lived with her husband for nearly 30 years, yet not a single day was happy. Between them, there was only the bond of marriage and responsibility, devoid of any love. Sophia lived for her children. She sat quietly beside her husband, in a life of luxury but impoverished in emotional richness, surviving because of Juan and her youngest son, Carlos. Juan and Carlos, although not born of the same mother, loved each other dearly. Throughout the day, Carlos stuck to his older brother's side like glue, except when he was at school. Being nearly 10 years older than Carlos, Juan had embraced his little brother since Carlos was a baby, showering him with affection. The relationship between Juan and Elena was also orchestrated by Carlos. Carlos had a deep love for nature and animals. He often wandered on the hill near their home, enjoying the serenity among the trees and fresh air. One day, he spotted a small, pitiful bird falling from its nest, crying out in hunger with its tiny mouth. The poor bird's wings were damaged, yet it seemed relieved to see Carlos approaching. Perhaps it had been abandoned by its parents or orphaned due to their demise, left to seek warmth and care in hunger and despair. As Carlos approached, a nearby king cobra suddenly emerged from the bushes, sensing its prey. It slithered toward the helpless bird. Seeing the imminent danger, Carlos quickly grabbed a nearby dry branch and fearlessly drove away the snake. In the struggle, Carlos managed to save the little bird, but unfortunately, he was bitten by the ferocious snake. Having witnessed Carlos's bravery, Elena silently admired and felt affection for the boy in front of her. Luckily for Carlos, Elena was nearby, searching for herbs, as she was the granddaughter of a renowned herbalist who knew the dangers of cobra venom. Without timely treatment, Carlos would surely have perished. Elena rushed over and offered to treat Carlos. Surprised but comforted by Elena's gentle and familiar demeanor, Carlos agreed with a smile. Elena widened the snake bite with a small dagger, drained the black blood from the wound, carefully applied various herbs from her basket, and bandaged Carlos's hand. Touched by Elena's care, Carlos felt grateful and moved. He gazed at the girl before him, finding her beautiful, gentle, and warm. From then on, they met on the hill every day. Elena, at 19, and Carlos, at 15, regarded Elena as an older sister. She came from a family renowned for producing fragrances in the region. With her knowledge passed down from her grandfather, Elena saved Carlos's life by chance. Seeing Carlos's dedication to the little bird and his love for animals, Elena taught him how to care for and raise the bird. In no time, the abandoned, weak bird became healthier under Carlos's care. Every day after school, Carlos wandered on the hill, playing with his new friend, the orphaned bird, who seemed to feel the warmth of Carlos's friendship, growing rapidly and beginning to flap its wings. It soared into the sky, mastering the skies. Carlos was happy to see his little friend grow up and inherit the strength of their family's eagle lineage, the unbeatable power. Carlos named it Aguila, meaning, Lord of the Sky. Elena told Carlos about the characteristics of this type of bird, which, according to legend, symbolized absolute loyalty. When mature and paired, they often lived together for life. If one died, the other would abandon its life. They hardly ever parted. It was believed that not even death could separate these mythical creatures. Carlos was amazed by this revelation. He never imagined that birds could love and be loyal in such a way. He cherished the white eagle even more. Time passed, and Aguila found a mate of its own. One day, when Carlos arrived, he saw another bird slightly smaller than Aguila. Both were standing side by side on a familiar tree branch. At first, Carlos was surprised to see the unfamiliar bird, but then he understood that the small bird he once knew had grown up and found its companion. Every day, Carlos visited and played with them. The bonded white eagles never left Carlos's side. They happily chirped when they saw Carlos from afar, flying to land on his hands and shoulders, playing with him on the beautiful green hill. The love between them grew stronger every day. Carlos and Elena were overjoyed because their efforts had paid off so beautifully. Both siblings felt fulfilled because, for almost a year, they had tirelessly nurtured the little bird. During that time, Carlos also grew fonder of Elena. He loved her, just like the affection he had for his older brother, Juan. As for Elena, she only had a younger sister named Rose, who was the same age as Carlos. Thus, Elena treated Carlos as a younger brother and showed him the love that a sister would. One day, Carlos asked Elena, "Elena, would you like to be my older sister?" "Oh, I've never seen you as a little brother," Elena replied. "I know, but I meant it like a sister-in-law," Carlos clarified. Elena blushed and felt embarrassed. Carlos looked at Elena teasingly and said, "Tomorrow, I'll bring Juan here to introduce you to. I assure you that you'll like my older brother instantly. He's a perfect match for you." Elena seemed hesitant about Carlos's sudden suggestion, but she simply smiled in response. The next day, as if by chance, Carlos brought his older brother to the hill to play without revealing his intentions. Juan immediately fell in love with Elena at first sight. Though he didn't say it aloud, after a day spent together, the usually reserved Juan found his life partner in Elena. She was exceptionally beautiful and gentle, with long chestnut hair and enchanting blue eyes. She was knowledgeable yet humble, with a soft, melodious voice like a nightingale's. Throughout their meeting, Juan discreetly observed Elena's caring gestures toward Carlos, her younger brother, much like an adoring older sister. All of these things touched Juan's heart deeply. Elena, too, was captivated by Juan's strong, charismatic presence. She noticed the intelligence in his slightly serious face, his gently curled, flowing hair, and his warm, ever-present smile. Though he spoke little, his attentive attitude and intelligent eyes concealed a wealth of emotion. At that moment, Elena understood the accuracy of Carlos's praise for his older brother. They began to meet more frequently after that, thanks to the bridge that was Carlos. The young couple increasingly understood and felt each other's love. After a short time, Juan officially confessed his love to Elena. She reciprocated his deep and genuine affection. Juan presented Elena with a ring left by his mother as a symbol of commitment, while Elena gave Juan a precious dagger passed down from her grandfather, adorned with sparkling gems. This dagger had been passed down through generations in Elena's family. Since exchanging these tokens of commitment, they pledged to be together forever. They met every day, and as the seasons passed, their footprints marked the small hill everywhere they went. Their world was as beautiful as a fairy tale, where they met and played joyfully together every day. Juan loved Elena as much as he loved his little brother, Carlos, and indulged Carlos in anything he wanted. Once, all three of them were playing together, and unfortunately, Carlos twisted his ankle and couldn't move, causing Elena and Juan to worry. In fact, Carlos had never been very healthy since childhood, as he had a mild heart condition. Carlos had a mild heart condition, so Juan was very caring towards him. When he saw Carlos in pain, it deeply saddened him. Elena found leaves to dress Carlos's wound and comforted him. Juan, on the other hand, carried his little brother on his back until they got home. Carlos felt happy to receive attention from both of them. In his childish thoughts, they were his whole world. He would feel sad if he went a day without them. Seeing their happiness, Carlos wished to meet someone like Elena in the future. He admired the love they had for each other. As usual, after school of Carlos, the three of them would climb the hill to play, where they built a tree hut to rest in case of sudden rain. Elena brought a basket of fruits and food, and they ate and talked together. After eating, Carlos planned to visit the pair of birds as usual, wanting to sensing something wrong, as Carlos heard strange cries from the white eagles. Watch them build their nest. It was a cry he had never heard before. Exactly, that's the mournful cry of the male eagle. It seems like it's crying in mourning for its unfortunate mate. They hurried up the hill to where the birds nested. Carlos was anxious, feeling something bad had happened to the birds he cared for since childhood. They were all shocked to find the pair of birds lying next to each other. Carlos hugged them and cried bitterly, remembering the memories he shared with them. He truly considered them as family. The sudden shock worsened his heart condition. Elena and Juan were stunned and distressed to witness this tragedy. They comforted Carlos as he cried for his lost friends. Juan panicked when he saw Carlos faint, desperately calling out to him to wake up. Seeing his brother in such a state, Juan feared the worst, thinking Carlos's heart condition had worsened due to the horrifying scene. Elena, searching for help, noticed a peculiar cluster of leaves resembling thin hands. She quickly plucked a handful, carefully crushing them in her hands. Running back to Juan, she gently squeezed a few drops into Carlos's mouth. Then, she pressed another handful against Carlos's nose. After a few moments, Carlos stirred and began to breathe, his pale face regaining color. He opened his eyes to see his tearful brother, weakly calling out to him. Juan hugged Carlos tightly, reassuring him that everything would be okay. They decided to bury the birds and comforted Carlos not to be sad anymore. Carlos let go of his brother's embrace, holding the birds close to his chest. He didn't cry anymore, but his heart was shattered. He sat there, looking at his friends for the last time, gently stroking their white feathers. With a desolate gaze, he watched Juan bury the birds under the tree where they nested. The three of them silently descended the hill. Elena walked in contemplation, knowing that both birds had died, likely from grief. She was walking and thinking about the sudden death of the pair of white eagles. She speculated that the female eagle must have met with such a tragedy that she perished. This deeply affected the male eagle. Perhaps out of immense sorrow for his mate, the male eagle also departed. A vague sadness overwhelmed her. She suddenly grabbed Juan's hand, giving him an earnest look. Juan reciprocated, feeling an indescribable surge of emotions. Both of them silently walked away together. After parting ways with Elena, Juan carried his little brother on his back as they quietly walked down. Juan felt his back wet with his brother's tears. In the days that followed, Carlos experienced recurring nightmares. He would often wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by the death of the white eagles. Sofia was deeply concerned for her son. She knew his health was not strong to begin with, and now he was being severely affected by the distress, weakening him rapidly. During her pregnancy with Carlos, Sofia's mood was always anxious and joyless. Sometimes she felt disheartened by family conflicts, leading to immoderate eating and resting, which greatly impacted her physical well-being and subsequently affected the unborn child. All of these issues stemmed from conflicts and troubles between the wives of Mr. Antonio. Sofia, the official and powerful wife, hailed from a prestigious jewelry and gemstone family. Her influence within the household was second only to her husband's. The union between the two families was meant to consolidate power, giving Sofia a voice in her husband's home, yet she never truly had Antonio's love. He had 3 wives, but his favorite was Carmen Gonzalez, who happened to be Juan's mother. Tensions between Carmen and Sofia were always present but never openly acknowledged, simmering beneath the surface. Although Carmen was the second wife in her lineage not as influential as Sofia's, Antonio cherished her for her beauty and intelligence. Carmen often provided astute advice to her husband in business matters and was the first to bear Antonio's child. Because of these factors, she received much love and material comfort from her husband. Sofia, as the first and legitimate wife, held less sway and seldom enjoyed such privileges. She harbored jealousy towards Carmen but often chose to remain silent. Her gentle and noble upbringing prevented her from seeking public attention or causing scandal, so she often suppressed her feelings. However, Sofia's older brother, Javier Ramirez, always felt indignant on her behalf. He sought to eliminate Carmen to assuage Sofia's grievances. Before marrying Antonio, Carmen had a lover named José López. Due to financial setbacks, José López decided to leave Carmen temporarily to seek fortune abroad, with plans to marry her upon his return. Antonio, who had long harbored feelings for Carmen, seized this opportunity to use his power to coerce Carmen into marrying him. The following year, José López returned, only to find Carmen married to Antonio and pregnant. Their love story was abruptly cut short. The two lovers arranged to meet one last time before José López would depart indefinitely. Somehow, Antonio got wind of this meeting and intervened, leading to José López's arrest on charges of seducing another man's wife. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, then later deported, although there were rumors of his mysterious death before serving his full sentence. Carmen had a premonition of her lover's fate, understanding her husband's sinister and vindictive nature. The 15-year sentence was just a facade. José López's true and harshest punishment was death. Carmen watched her lover unfairly condemned, helpless to save him. She grew resentful towards her husband and nearly estranged herself from him. Though deeply enamored with her, Antonio grew angry at his wife's rejection. He became resentful and tormented Carmen in various ways, despite his enduring love for her. The unfortunate woman died and revived many times, never fearing death but refusing to forgive her husband. Previously, Sofia disliked Carmen, but being a kind and understanding person, she sympathized with Carmen's plight as a former rival. Now, she secretly sought to help Carmen, despite not letting her husband know. Due to abuse and deprivation during pregnancy, Carmen's body quickly deteriorated, but she endured to ensure the birth of her child. Though no longer attached to life, she believed her unborn child was innocent. After expending all her strength to give birth to Juan, she entrusted him to Sofia, believing her to be a good person. She then peacefully passed away. Perhaps Carmen was finally liberated from worldly suffering. Before closing her eyes, she called out José López's name and smiled brightly, anticipating their reunion in the afterlife. 5. Antonio mourned deeply for the loss of his beloved Carmen. He often visited the room where Carmen had lived, gazing at her photos on the wall, then silently drank himself into a stupor, sometimes sleeping on the floor until morning. No one would have imagined someone as cruel as Antonio could love Carmen so devotedly. For 5 years, he returned to Carmen's room every day since her passing, searching for her shadow in every corner. Juan, the orphaned child who was now 5 years old, bore a striking resemblance to his late mother, which only intensified Antonio's longing for her. He instructed Sofia to provide everything for Juan, as a way to compensate for the absence of the child's mother. Perhaps it was also a form of remorse for his own extreme cruelty that led to the tragic death of his unfortunate wife. On one occasion, on the 6th anniversary of Carmen's death, in a state of drunken grief, Antonio returned to their former bedroom and, to his astonishment, saw Carmen tidying up the bed they used to share. Overjoyed, he rushed to embrace her, calling out her name and expressing how much he missed her. He held onto the woman tightly, showering her with kisses. That night, Antonio was passionately affectionate, seeking to make up for the longing he had endured all this time. The next morning, when he sobered up, Antonio finally realized that the woman lying beside him was not his Carmen but Clara, Carmen's loyal servant. Since her mistress's death, Clara had been grateful for the kindness Carmen had shown her, so she often came to tend to and tidy up the former mistress's room. Upon the previous night's incident, she was too frightened to refuse Antonio's advances while he was inebriated. She never entertained thoughts of Antonio, knowing well his cruel and vindictive nature. Disappointed and angry, Antonio forbade Clara from revealing the incident to anyone. A family of such renown and power could not tolerate a servant becoming a mistress. Clara realized the danger she was in but didn't know how to escape it. 2 months later, when she found out she was pregnant, her fear intensified. Antonio also discovered Clara's pregnancy and planned to dispose of the unborn child. Fearing for her life, Clara took a desperate gamble and confessed everything to Sofia, hoping for mercy. Sofia was shocked to hear the truth from Clara but felt compassion for the young maid's predicament. However, knowing her husband's ruthless nature, she understood that Clara's life held little value in his eyes. Sofia promised to find a way to help, although she knew the chances of saving the young maid and her innocent child were slim. A week passed, and Sofia still hadn't found a feasible solution to save the maid and her unborn child. One evening, Sofia was surprised to see her brother, Javier Ramirez, unexpectedly visiting. He rarely visited her since Carmen's death. He mentioned needing to speak with Antonio about some business matters. Antonio was not at home at the time, so Sofia questioned her brother about any involvement in the disclosure of José's affair, which led to the tragic fate of the couple. He denied any involvement, but Sofia was convinced of her brother's role. She warned him not to assist her husband in evil deeds, threatening to sever ties if such a thing were to happen again. Javier Ramirez, who only had one younger sister, Sofia, had always doted on her since childhood, so he promised not to assist Antonio any further. Sofia sensed that her brother's unusual presence here must have had a reason. She wondered if it had something to do with Clara. When Antonio returned, Javier quickly greeted his sister and mentioned needing to speak with his brother-in-law about some business matters. After a while, when Javier didn't come out, Sofia curiously entered the grand hall of the castle, where her brother and Antonio were deep in conversation. The two men feared that Sofia would discover what they were plotting. So when they saw her enter the grand hall, they quickly diverted the conversation to another topic. Sofia silently walked out and waited outside for her brother. Seeing Sofia's stern face, Javier realized he couldn't keep it a secret and revealed Antonio's plan to dispose of Clara. Enraged, Sofia urged her brother not to continue with such evil deeds and pressured him to help her save Clara. Thanks to her intervention, the maid and her child were spared from death. Sofia provided Clara with some money and instructed her to flee far away and never return. Clara was overjoyed to escape the death sentence, expressing deep gratitude to Sofia. Antonio remained completely oblivious to the entire affair as everything continued to unfold quietly. A year later, Sofia received unexpected joy. The woman who had waited for so many weary years now rejoiced in happiness upon learning she was pregnant, and 9 months later, she gave birth to Carlos. It was her greatest joy since joining the Martínez family. Alongside her 7-year-old son, Juan, Sofia now had another source of joy in Carlos. Though she lacked her husband's love, Sofia found solace in her 2 sons, beautiful and obedient like angels. Seeing Carlos lying peacefully in the hospital bed, Sofia was filled with worry. Observing Juan sitting silently beside his younger brother, his sad expression deepened Sofia's concern. Both boys were her only comfort in the past years. Despite being the wealthy mistress of the opulent Castellano castle, Sofia's heart was icy cold without the love of her 2 sons to warm it. Juan's wedding was set to take place the next day, yet seeing her son's frail condition, Sofia had a premonition. Her anxiety grew. While Juan appeared calm on the surface, Sofia understood the battles her son faced internally through his eyes and the affection they shared. Juan, aware of his mother's worries, reassured her, promising to fulfill his duties to the family and his beloved. The atmosphere at home remained tranquil amidst the preparations for Juan's grand day, the eldest son of the family. Castellano Castle, closed off for decades, was finally opened to esteemed guests. Curiosity surrounded the castle's beauty and fame, yet its doors remained shut, except for the main entrance, always open, while all others, including windows, remained tightly closed regardless of the season. Rumors circulated outside about strange occurrences within the castle, secrets kept by its owner. There was talk of an old man with a limp who used to beg on the streets, revealing that over 30 years ago, he had been a servant in Castellano Castle. He and many servants had witnessed eerie events in a room on the castle's top floor. They often saw a young woman in her 20s, her face pale and sorrowful yet exquisitely beautiful. It was unclear why she was confined to that room. Only 2 men would visit her a week: Manuel, Antonio's father, and Alajal, Antonio's older brother around 20 years old. At that time, Antonio was just a 15-year-old boy. Each time Antonio's father and brother appeared, the woman would scream wildly, likely due to severe physical abuse before uttering such cries. The old man with the limp, then a servant to Antonio's father, was tasked with bringing her meals. Some time later, the beggar noticed scars marring the woman's once beautiful face, seemingly not inflicted by Manuel and his son. It appeared she had deliberately disfigured herself, possibly pregnant as her belly was noticeably larger. After her face became disfigured, Manuel and his son visited less frequently. It was also noted that the woman's outbursts diminished as she was no longer subjected to brutal beatings. The pitiful woman remained isolated in an empty room, devoid of any possessions. The beggar continued to bring her food daily. Observing her alternating between laughter and tears, incessantly cursing the Martínez lineage, she declared that all of Martínez's descendants must suffer the consequences of their actions. No one understood the significance of her words. Then one day, as usual, the servants took turns coming to the crazy woman's room. They brought her some food, then cleaned up all the mess and dirt that this woman left behind. One time, a maid came to work. She accidentally opened the window to the room, because she felt stuffy, probably due to lack of light for a long time, so it was very humid. The maid didn't know that, she acted, will create a tragedy for everyone working in the castle. The crazy woman waited until no one was paying attention. She climbed up to the window and probably accidentally fell from above. Before rushing out, she kept screaming in horror. Her eyes sparkled, her voice hissed and laughed crazy. All evil people must go to hell for the crimes they have committed. Then her mournful laughter, like a ghost's howl, was cut off by the sound of a loud impact on the ground. Fresh, crimson blood splattered all over a corner of the magnificent castle. After the death of the woman, all the servants who witnessed the woman's death were then all fired with an oath not to reveal anything. As for the young maid, no one knows where she went from there. I don't know if the old man's story is true, but a short time later, people did not see him appear again. However, the more the rumor secretly spread everywhere, it became somewhat more terrifying. Rumor has it that there are 2 new maids applying to work in the castle. They slept in the staff room, close to the crazy woman's room from before. At midnight, 2 girls went to the bathroom together. They suddenly saw a woman standing and sobbing in the corner of the hallway. The girls thought it was someone who did the same thing as them, maybe having a sad incident, so they stood here crying. In their hearts of sympathy, they felt sorry for them, so they walked up to ask. The woman said nothing, just silently stared at the child lying in her arms, but when she looked up, They were horrified to discover her face was full of blood, covered in dark, bleeding wounds. She held up the baby wrapped in a cloth towards the two girls. Surprisingly, it had absolutely no face. The child's body twisted with a struggling cry, as if it were thirsty for milk. The woman pulled the child closer to her chest and comforted her, but the child did not stop. She cried even louder and louder. Angry, she threw the child to the ground. It was so horrifying. The two maids widened their eyes in horror at what was before them. It turned out, it was just a pool of black blood, smelled fishy, and flowed endlessly. Both maids ran away to their room in panic. A few days later, they resigned without giving a clear reason. People also raised questions. For unknown reasons, the master of the castle ordered all the doors to be closed, except for the main entrance. Many servants said that, at midnight, often hear a plaintive cry, but don't know where it comes from. Not many workers dare to travel from midnight until morning, unless it is an urgent matter. Sophia didn't believe in such malicious rumors. She understood that the Martínez family was renowned and likely faced pressure from competing rivals. Neither her husband nor anyone in the family had ever mentioned such matters. Having lived in the castle for over 20 years without witnessing anything out of the ordinary, she dismissed it as mere gossip. The only thing unsettling her now was her son Juan's arranged marriage to Ana, the daughter of the Rodriguez family, famous for their vineyards. Though everything seemed to be going as planned by her husband, Sophia had a foreboding sense that these calm moments were precursors to impending trouble, but she couldn't fathom what it might be. Elena was devastated when Juan unexpectedly announced his engagement to Ana, a girl from the wine-making Rodriguez family whom he neither loved nor had met. Elena was speechless upon hearing Juan's words. Their love was profound and beautiful, and they had envisioned a happy future together. Now, everything crumbled, even as their love for each other remained fervent. Elena had shed tears all week, while Juan silently endured his pain. At times, he entertained the thought of eloping with Elena, but the dire consequences for his mother deterred him. Although not his biological mother, Sophia had showered Juan with maternal love since birth. He understood his father Antonio's ruthlessness, dispelling any notion of fleeing with Elena. Accepting this marriage was the only option left. But the thought of Elena left Juan feeling as though an invisible hand was crushing his heart. Elena tearfully expressed that without him, her life would lose all meaning. Juan understood the implication behind Elena's words. Their time together had bound them inseparably, like an unbreakable thread. They were like white eagles. If separated, the lovers would surely perish. They had made a solemn vow to that effect. Miguel Fernandez, Elena's grandfather, a renowned perfumer. The Fernandez family was one of the 4 powerful families in Montblanco. The fragrances produced by the Fernandez family were highly esteemed and among the most expensive in the world. For the past decade, Miguel had been quietly developing a rare and exquisite fragrance that had yet to hit the market. Its aroma was luxurious and enticing, capable of lingering for an extended period without fading. Due to its exclusivity, it was reserved for nobility, commanding an exorbitant price. Today marked the final stages of launching this high-end fragrance, which had surpassed all others in the market. Miguel had conducted extensive research, with invaluable assistance from his granddaughter Elena. Strangely, Elena had been absent all week, and Miguel sensed something amiss. She appeared downcast, reserved, and lacked her usual cheerfulness. Perhaps there was discord between the young lovers lately, Miguel speculated. Seeing Elena happy with her friend reassured Miguel. When Elena unexpectedly returned to the laboratory, Miguel teased her about her absence. Elena awkwardly responded that she was fine and asked why he thought otherwise. Miguel chuckled but didn't say more, continuing with his work. As Elena approached a bottle of yellow liquid on the wooden shelf, she was engulfed by a peculiar scent filling the room. Miguel cautioned her not to get too close, as it was not yet the final product. It needed a little more time for the molecules to fully integrate with the water and for any toxic substances to be completely removed. Only then would it be suitable for use as a fragrance. He took the bottle from Elena and placed it carefully on a stand to prevent spillage, warning her of its toxicity. Elena widened her eyes, repeating, "Deadly. So, our current fragrances could be just as dangerous." Miguel patiently explained that accidental ingestion at this stage could be fatal, even a few drops could take a life. However, after a few days, it would be completely harmless. The fragrances they currently used, if ingested accidentally, would only cause unconsciousness and were not lethal. So, at this stage, it's no different from a vial of poison. Correct, my dear. However, if it were lethal, it would be a swift and painless death. It affects the heart directly, causing cardiac arrest, rendering the victim unconscious. Almost no one perceives any pain. One could say that death by fragrance is gentle, as soft as a kiss. We must call it the kiss of death. Elena chuckled along with her grandfather, remarking how it would be the quickest and most peaceful way to heaven. They shared a cheerful gaze. Miguel changed the subject, asking if Elena wanted to accompany him to the Martínez wedding as usual. Elena hesitated, her expression somber. This time, perhaps I won't go, Grandpa. You should take Rose instead. She'd love to go with you. Is everything all right, dear? It's nothing, Grandpa. We also need to give Rose some experiences. She's 15 now, after all. Fair enough, this time we'll go according to your wishes. Mr. Miguel knew there was likely a difficult reason behind Elena's refusal. She was cautious, so her words and actions were always deliberate and purposeful. Despite his curiosity, Mr. Miguel only thought to himself, somewhat surprised and suspicious of his granddaughter's recent attitude. During dinner, he asked Francisco, the Martínez family's son, what the name of their son was. Francisco seemed surprised by his father's question, casually replying, "It's probably Juan Martínez." After a brief silence, Mr. Miguel left the dining table, sinking into thought. Juan. The name sounded very familiar. Mr. Miguel lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply and exhaling a puff of white smoke into the air. It seemed that Elena's boyfriend's name was also Juan. Mr. Miguel might have known the reason why Elena didn't want to attend the Martínez wedding. He had noticed Elena's unusual behavior recently and now understood. The issue had certainly become serious. Elena had always said she loved Juan dearly. Once, Mr. Miguel mentioned that his friend's son had noticed Elena and wanted to marry her, asking what her thoughts were. Elena had responded firmly, saying she would only marry Juan, and no one else. Mr. Miguel knew his granddaughter had a boyfriend, so he never pressured her and allowed her freedom of choice. He was open-minded, understanding the modern times and not clinging to old-fashioned customs. He disliked the Martínez family for their temporary interests, still engaging in arranged marriages to consolidate power and status. They sacrificed their children's happiness for immediate gain, without considering their feelings. Knowing that young Juan loved his granddaughter, but was forced into a marriage with Ana, the Rodriguez family's daughter, made Mr. Miguel concerned about his granddaughter's recent gestures and words. Elena's behavior seemed calculatingly unusual. Mr. Miguel contemplated for a while before calling Elena to him. She appeared normal, unchanged. She still smiled happily as always. But there was a fleeting sadness in Elena's eyes when she heard about the Martínez wedding, scheduled for the next 2 days. Mr. Miguel thought he might have been too worried, his granddaughter seemed fine. Watching Elena leave, Mr. Miguel still felt something was not right. Clearly, his granddaughter and Juan Martínez were deeply in love, yet Elena remained indifferent to Juan and Ana's upcoming wedding. Mr. Miguel pondered over Elena's attitude. He recalled Elena's previous words, "I'll only marry Juan." Elena was determined and never spoke lightly. Her love for Juan was so profound, could she have suddenly given up on it? Elena's excessively calm demeanor worried Mr. Miguel even more. As an experienced man, he knew the issue was very serious. Before a stormy sea erupts, the surface is usually very calm. Elena's moments of serene indifference undoubtedly heralded an impending storm. He paced back and forth in the room, with troubling predictions, fearing that something terrible might happen to this family. Elena had clung to him since her mother's death when she was only 5. The little girl had been comforted and nurtured by him, passing on all the knowledge he had about perfume production. Elena was diligent and intelligent, quickly grasping most of the secrets. Mr. Miguel placed all his hopes in this granddaughter. When she confessed her love for Juan, he saw Elena smile and enjoy life much more. He was also happy to see his granddaughter living happily. But Juan's sudden departure from Elena to marry Ana would undoubtedly be a big shock to the young girl. All the normal signs Elena showed were just a facade, hiding the impending storm of despair within. Mr. Miguel understood what was happening in his granddaughter's heart, but he himself felt powerless. He shuddered at a thought, then quickly shook his head to dispel the bad idea. Mr. Miguel sadly returned to the laboratory. Everything was normal, there was no disturbance or change. The yellow-colored bottle still lay in its place on the tray as he had placed it. Mr. Miguel furrowed his brow in thought before deciding to make some adjustments to the pale yellow bottle. Then he put it back in its place as before. He sighed softly before leaving the room, his mind filled with worries and unease, like a soldier before a major battle. Carlos had been in bed for weeks on end. His health, never robust, had been greatly affected by the tragic death of the White Eagles. Juan sat by his little brother's side every day, comforting him. Thanks to this, Carlos had improved considerably. He always asked about Elena, wanting to meet her, but Juan restrained him, saying they would wait a few more days. No one told Carlos about Juan's upcoming wedding. If he knew Juan's future wife wasn't Elena, it would undoubtedly be another shock to Carlos. The boy assumed that Elena would marry Juan. As the wedding day approached, Juan's anguish deepened. He wandered around all day like a lost soul. The thought of leaving Elena tore at his heart. He wondered why fate was so cruel to him. Memories of happy moments with Elena squeezed his heart tightly. Many sleepless nights were spent contemplating escape, longing to leave his family behind and run away with Elena, but he knew the tragic consequences that would fall upon his mother. Juan understood his cruel father's wrath and how it would be directed at his mother if he disappeared. He couldn't bear to burden his mother with such anger. Knowing how much his mother sacrificed for his siblings, he'd rather die than endanger her. In the past days, Juan and Elena met in tears, sitting silently together amidst a darkening landscape. The carefree laughter of their past was gone. They knew their days as lovers were numbered, and their dreams of a life together shattered. One morning, Juan visited Carlos's bedside. The little boy was still asleep. Juan held his brother's hand, tears welling in his eyes, and whispered, "Carlos, my little one, we might not see each other again. You must live happily and grow up fast to protect Mom for me. I love you very much, my little brother." Juan's tears fell onto Carlos's hand as he kissed his brother's forehead for the last time before hastily leaving. The sunlight streaming through the window, preparing for the upcoming wedding, woke Carlos, starting him. He heard Juan's voice in his sleep and suddenly felt anxious, calling out for his mother. He said, "Mom, please find Juan right away. I'm scared because of what Juan said earlier." Hearing her son's distress, Sophia rushed to comfort him, worried about what Juan might have said. Sophia recalled Juan's strange gestures from a few days ago. Juan's ominous silence and clinginess to his mother worried Sophia. She sensed something terrible was about to happen to her eldest son. Despite Juan's lack of words, his affectionate gestures towards her reminded her of his childhood, deeply touching her. Sometimes, she caught Juan looking at her with a strange mix of tenderness and pain in his eyes. Sophia attributed his unusual behavior to the impending marriage, assuming he was sad about marrying someone he didn't love. Unable to do anything more, Sophia called for assistance and hurried towards the hilltop. Meanwhile, Juan and Elena sat together under a tree, once a nesting ground for white eagles. A raised mound of earth at the tree's base marked where Juan buried the unfortunate birds. Holding Elena's hands, they remained silent, Juan gazing deeply into his beloved's eyes. "It's a pity we can't stay together as a married couple. I wish we could be like those birds, holding hands as we soar to eternal happiness. I'm not afraid of anything anymore if I can die with you," Juan expressed softly. Elena's face suddenly lit up, her previous sadness vanishing. She smiled gently and nodded, "Exactly, I'm no longer afraid of anything either. Death itself can't separate us." Elena took out a vial of pale yellow liquid from her pocket, holding it out to Juan tenderly. "This is the elixir of love, it will take us to a place of eternal freedom for loving couples. A gentle and romantic journey." Elena winked playfully at Juan, saying, "Do you like sweet drinks? It's sweet and fragrant." Juan laughed and replied, "If you like it, then I certainly will too. It will be as sweet as our love." Elena drank half the bottle of honey-like liquid and handed the rest to Juan. After they finished drinking, they sat down together under the tree, where the two eagles used to nest. Juan lovingly wrapped his arm around Elena, planting a kiss on her cheek. Elena nestled her head on Juan's shoulder, closing her eyes in bliss. Seeing Elena drifting off to sleep, Juan whispered softly in her ear, "Rest, my love. Let me sing to you, your favorite wanderer's song. In her half-asleep state, Elena happily nodded, smiling. Juan suddenly heard someone calling his name. He felt a bit blurry, as if the Grim Reaper was calling him. The voice grew closer. Juan thought in his haze, he had to find a way to reach Elena, he couldn't leave her alone. He called out to his sleeping lover, her eyes closed in peaceful slumber. A faint smile lingered on her lips. Juan reached for the small dagger Elena had given him, which he always carried. He kissed her on the face, and in a moment, everything spun around him. Juan collapsed, his head resting on Elena's chest. He drifted into a deep sleep. Sophia was horrified to see her son lying beside a girl she had never met. She cried out, "Juan, wake up, don't scare your mother like this." She knelt down and embraced him, her hands soaked in blood. She almost fainted from fear. In his daze, Juan recognized his mother, holding him and crying. "Juan, why did you do this?" She choked, unable to continue. Juan regained some consciousness and whispered to his mother, "I'm sorry, Mom." His hands slipped away, his eyes shut, lost in sleep. Blood continued to flow from his wound, staining his mother's clothes. Sophia held her son in agony, wailing in pain, then collapsed unconscious. The servants quickly carried Sophia and Juan on stretchers and hurried home. Among them, someone recognized Elena and rushed to inform her family. Every effort was made to revive Sophia. She ordered everyone to keep Juan's incident sealed. Antonio was outside at the time, unaware of what had just happened in the house. Sophia refused to believe her son was dead, still holding on to hope, so she called for the best doctors to attend to Juan's condition. Fortunately, the wound was not too severe, no internal organs were damaged. He had lost a lot of blood and was unconscious. But if the doctor hadn't arrived in time, Juan would have surely died. After a while of emergency treatment, Juan escaped death's grip. Sophia instructed Juan to say he was attacked while shopping for wedding supplies. He understood what his mother meant and nodded in agreement. Juan asked about Elena, and everyone confirmed she had died. Juan was saddened, unable to comprehend why things turned out this way. He should have been the one to die. What meaning was there in living alone in this world? He wanted to end his life with the dagger once again. But seeing his mother's suffering face, he couldn't leave. Perhaps fate had planned it this way, so he reluctantly abandoned that idea. Antonio returned angrily upon learning of Juan's attack. Sophia advised her husband not to make a fuss, especially with Juan's wedding approaching. He reluctantly agreed, knowing she was right. A few days later, Juan's health improved, and the wedding proceeded as planned. When Carlos found out his sister-in-law wasn't Elena, he protested vehemently. He insisted on seeing Antonio to plead for his brother. Sophia and Juan had to take turns to calm him down, eventually convincing him. The boy remained unaware of Elena's death. A grand wedding took place in the famous Castellano castle. People anxiously awaited the moment when the groom would hand flowers to the bride and exchange vows. Juan seemed lifeless, like a machine, only moving when prompted. All eyes were on Juan. Though no one spoke it aloud, everyone noticed the groom's unusual demeanor. He looked handsome, elegant in his white suit, holding a bouquet of deep red roses. Yet his face was shrouded in a cold mist, his eyes vacant. His movements appeared clumsy and awkward. Antonio was the most worried. He sensed his son's agitation but dared not show anger with so many eyes watching. Sophia stood beside her husband, but her attention was solely on Juan. She hoped the ceremony would pass quickly. She felt uneasy, as if a fire was burning within her. Carlos looked at his brother intently. He knew Juan was suffering deeply, but he didn't know how to help. His eyes were red as if crying for Juan's doomed love. But strangely, in a fleeting moment, Juan suddenly seemed to awaken when he heard someone whispering in his ear. "Hey, Juan Martínez, Elena is waiting for you here. Come quickly." The young man looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice. It seemed to echo from behind the bride. The window was just a few meters away from her. Juan confirmed, the voice seemed to come from this direction. He focused on a beautiful woman, but her face looked pale, sad. She was in her 20s, wearing a loose white dress. Juan was overjoyed to see Elena standing beside her. She was in a pristine white dress, waving her hand, beckoning Juan closer. He smiled brightly and walked toward her with the bouquet. Seeing her son become lively and alert, Antonio and Sophia felt relieved. They thought perhaps Juan had come to his senses and willingly accepted this marriage. Everyone applauded and congratulated. All eyes remained fixed on the groom, Juan Martínez. But everyone was disappointed when the young man holding the bouquet walked straight to the window, where he saw Elena standing, smiling. Juan was a little surprised to see Elena stepping back. She gently stood up from the chair nearby and walked to the open door, her gaze fixed on Juan, her lips still smiling invitingly. The light from outside illuminated her, making Elena look radiant. She stood there, smiling and beckoning, waiting for Juan to step forward. Juan noticed behind Elena was a green hill covered in lush greenery. It was a place where Juan, Elena, and Carlos used to go every day. Elena stepped closer to the door leading to that hill. Strangely, outside the door, a pair of white eagles suddenly flew in. Elena joyfully ran out to greet them, and the two birds cuddled up to her. Surprised, she looked up, smiling, and called out, "Juan, come here with me, let's go up the hill together, come here." Elena waved her hand, signaling for Juan to quickly step outside with her. Juan smiled with happiness, stepped closer, and walked to the door. He approached where Elena was standing. He wanted to give the bouquet to Elena. People couldn't understand what Juan was doing, they widened their eyes in astonishment. It seemed like Juan was talking to someone. Suddenly, Carlos pushed everyone aside and ran over, shouting, "Hey, don't do this, don't leave me." His screams startled everyone. They wanted to rush forward to stop Juan, but he had already dashed out of the door to grasp the hand of his lover. Sofia and Carlos rushed to the window and looked down. Juan lay on the ground, his eyes wide open, staring as if at his two most beloved people. A smile lingered on his lips. A stream of red flowed around him, resembling a red scarf twisting and turning, hitting Sofia and Carlos in the eyes. Both of them fell silent for a few seconds, then collapsed unconscious after witnessing this horrifying scene. No one could have imagined that a joyful day would turn into a day of mourning and sorrow. People left in shock and horror at the terrifying event that had just unfolded before their eyes. Some whispered softly, while others recalled some curse they had heard before. In the days that followed, the Castellano castle was steeped in mournful silence. Antonio silently ordered servants to quickly bury Juan in the family cemetery. Sofia was quickly revived after receiving medical attention. However, Carlos seemed to be completely unconscious and unable to wake up. The best doctors were called in to treat him. They believed that the shock he experienced, coupled with this event, had severely affected his body, causing temporary unconsciousness. It might take a long time to recover, or it might not recover at all. Sofia could only cry upon hearing this. These two children were her reason for living. One had permanently departed, and the other might not stay with her either. She had no strength left to cry, she just sat quietly by her son. Every time she saw Antonio coming in, she would leave and throw him a look full of hatred. One could imagine that if Sofia had the ability to kill Antonio, she would definitely do so without hesitation. After Juan's death, Sofia became strong and no longer feared Antonio. She resented her husband, whom she had served every day. Now, whenever she saw Antonio's face, Sofia felt overwhelmed with anger. The two of them hadn't spoken to each other since Juan's death. Antonio's patriarchal nature had also diminished somewhat. Whenever he encountered his wife's cold gaze, he felt it was too icy and somewhat fearful. However, with his inherently wicked and cold-blooded nature, which was not easily denied, he still harbored schemes and dirty tricks in his mind, seeking personal gain. Antonio still harbored resentment over Juan's death, as it had thwarted his opportunity to increase his power and benefits. Carlos lay on the bed for months without showing signs of recovery. Sofia sat by him every day, whispering into his ear. She believed her son could hear her. "Carlos, my dear, wake up quickly. You must get better, grow strong to protect me," she pleaded. "Don't abandon me like Juan did. You mustn't." Tears choked her as she imagined Carlos never returning. Her heart bled. After 3 months, Carlos showed signs of improvement. Sometimes, his fingers twitched when Sofia spoke. His body gained color and vitality. One evening, Sofia, exhausted, drifted to sleep. She felt someone holding her hand. Opening her eyes, she rejoiced as Carlos was awake. He looked at her, tears welling up as he saw her smiling. In his moments of consciousness, Carlos heard his brother urging him to recover. Also, Sophia's daily words of anguish, blaming Carlos for neglecting his responsibilities, spurred his awakening. A month later, Carlos was fully recovered. Yet, he couldn't forget his brother's tragic death. He became quieter, less jovial. Whenever Sophia saw him lost in silent contemplation, his eyes dull, she worried. She sought advice from a doctor, who advised changing Carlos's environment. He warned against reminders of past sorrow, which could plunge Carlos into deep depression, challenging to cure. Sophia decided to relocate Carlos, cutting ties with their past. Antonio, subdued this time, agreed. They sent Carlos far away, erasing him from Montblanco. Mr. Miguel fell silent upon hearing the news of his granddaughter's sudden passing, the cause of which remained unknown. The girl's lifeless body was brought home, enveloping the entire household in mourning. Mr. Miguel sat silently beside her, devastated by the collapse of all the hopes he had placed in Elena. The secrets of perfume blending and production, passed down through generations, would now be lost. Holding his granddaughter's hand, he whispered softly, feeling immense pity for the poor child. All his efforts now seemed futile. Why did she have to leave like this? Mr. Miguel's eyes welled up with tears as he stared at the murky water, trembling with disbelief at the thought of Elena's death. With a heavy heart, he bowed his head, still clasping her soft hands tightly. Suddenly, Mr. Miguel jolted as if struck by a realization, pondering why Elena's body still retained warmth, as if alive, despite half a day having passed. Then, a crucial thought occurred to him, prompting him to rush to the laboratory. The perfume bottle seemed to have vanished, and Mr. Miguel suddenly understood. A mysterious smile flickered across his lips as he ordered everyone to stay away from Elena's room. After 24 hours, Mr. Miguel carefully administered a few drops of a golden liquid, shimmering like honey, into his granddaughter's mouth. Elena took a deep breath and stirred awake. "Oh, grandfather, what happened to me? Where is Juan? Why didn't he come to see me?" she asked. Mr. Miguel knew he had to tell her the truth, sparing her from clinging onto any false hope regarding Juan. Elena wanted to know why she was still alive after consuming the perfume. Mr. Miguel explained that he had diluted the perfume beforehand, anticipating her desperate thoughts. This reduced the danger significantly, only inducing a light, almost imperceptible coma with shallow breaths for 24 hours, after which she would awaken. As for Juan, due to differences in body weight, the poison couldn't induce a deep coma in him, leaving him in a temporary state of confusion. Unfortunately, he believed Elena was gone and acted rashly. Mr. Miguel then asked Elena if she still had the ancestral dagger. Upon hearing this, Elena understood everything, grieving for Juan, her beloved. Mr. Miguel advised her to accept her fate and live well for the sake of her unborn child, assuring her that he had planned everything accordingly. She must be strong and overcome this ordeal, as everything would eventually turn out for the better. Upon hearing Mr. Miguel reveal that she was pregnant with Juan's child, Elena felt comforted. She realized she had become a mother and that the child needed to be protected and nurtured properly. She believed that Juan would also want her to act in this manner.